I have Pachico in the chat saying, last video was so good. So good. I've been making my friends watch it. Thank you very much, Pachico. I appreciate that. Stephen Russo is the king of Ireland himself, the despot of Ireland, the tyrant, when I eventually get control of the place, which is Ireland's only hope. Right? Ireland and Great Britain. The only political hope is that I basically end up running the show. Seriously, I'm so black-pilled about politics in Ireland and the UK. Ireland has just passed this law. Basically, if you're accused of racism, it is on the onus of the accused to prove that he or she isn't racist and wasn't thinking those racist thoughts. It's absolutely insane. Just look it up, like Irish free speech law. Even leftists in Ireland, even some leftists are coming out against it. It is absolutely nuts. It's really blackpilling. I need to take control. The sooner the better. Yeah, thanks everybody who's in the chat here. Sorry for keeping you waiting at the start there. If you were waiting, I had a wee bit of a technical problem. So, from the start of the having a look at the chat here, just going from the top. Tinted Vision says Andes Antrim, which is Irish for the nice Antrim. Thank you very much, Tinted Vision. And RRTNZ gave me 5.5 New Zealand dollars. I think we say Kiwi dollars. So thank you very much, RRTNZ. Chica Luca GB has been watching my videos recently in a way. So thanks very much, Chica. I appreciate that. Let's take a look here. Morning Despot says, oh, hey, Kean's in. Kean Wedge, long time no speak. Yeah, I hope you're doing well, Kean. Thanks very much for the message, and good morning or evening to you, or whatever it is in Canada right now, whatever coast you're on. And let's have a look. Is that accent Randallstown or Ballymena or something nearby? It's Belfast. It's a Belfast accent. Let's see. Can't blame you. Politics in the UK and Ireland are insane. Yeah, it is. It is insane. Do you know what I was thinking? Actually, I realized a couple of years ago the UK is such a backward country. It thinks it isn't. It thinks it's very progressive and forward-looking and one of the more morally advanced countries, but it's just backward. Like, it's so weird the way they do things. Like a country that basically gives a whole month of the year for the celebration of LGBTQIA, etc. These people who don't actually, I mean, they don't have children, right? It's a sterile lifestyle. But families, the unit from which society is formed, like what do you get? 1 day for Father's Day and 1 day for Mother's Day. It's just, it's backward. It's utterly backward by design, of course. Anyway, that's enough of me ranting on about politics. Let's get on with the movies and TV shows that we're going to talk about. So Scott Campbell, hey, the fan without a face just came in. Scott Campbell says, I managed 31 minutes into Peter Pan and Wendy and wanted to kill myself. It is absolute bollocks, isn't it? I got 20 minutes in, 25 minutes. I lost track. Like, it's so bad, it kind of warps time. So you lose your perception of time. That's how fucking shite that film. I won't even call it a film. It's a plagiarism. It's not a legitimate film in its own right, but it's terrible. It's truly terrible. It's awful. Right? I can't even. It's almost hard to comprehend just how fucking bad that movie is. The Fan Without a Face. Can you hear me? Hold on. I'm going to try to put a banner up. Maybe a second. Yeah, just give me a second here. Fan, can you hear me? Keep up the good work, Despot. Oliver Fallon says, thanks very much. Right, I am going to try to get, let me have a look here, settings. I had it up before, but I was having technical difficulties. Anyway, so yeah, I'll probably start out, I'll start out with probably Cleopatra and get started with. And I think I'm probably one of the few people in the world who has watched the first, I mean, I've watched 2.5 episodes of it, and it's truly terrible stuff. Not just for the historical distortion and the Afrocentrism, but just as a show, it's absolute garbage. It's almost unbelievably bad for a ton of reasons. like just I've got a load of notes here on Cleopatra. It's just page after page after page of historical inaccuracies, crappy production design, bad acting. It goes on, and I will get to them. But just broadly speaking, when I watched the show, it seemed to me that they just had an agenda. Their agenda was, let's claim Cleopatra as our own. And I don't mean black people, I mean Afrocentrists specifically, the people who want to politicize black identity and black history and make it basically a weapon in the culture war. Their goal was, let's take Cleopatra away from the Elizabeth Taylor image that she has, and let's make her a weapon in the culture war. That was their aim, and it didn't occur to them when they were doing this that it might offend Egypt, for example. Sorry, just a minute. I'm trying to I'm trying to bring the other guy into the chat. They basically wanted to use it as a weapon in the culture war, and they didn't care. They didn't care that the Egyptians would be offended by this, because I think from their perspective, Egypt is just, it's beneath contempt. It's not part of the West. It's not part of what they would consider to be the civilized world, and it's not a part of their world that they particularly care about or want to take part in. Can you hear me, Fan? I can't hear anything you're saying. Um, just give me a second. Give me a second. Yeah, I'm trying to get the other fella to. I'll ask the chat. Maybe the chat can hear him, but I can't. Chat, can you hear the fan without a face? Hold on, I'll get rid of that banner. Thanks for letting me know. Nope, no, we cannot. All right, thanks for letting me know. I thought maybe you could hear him, but I couldn't. Loved your Galad. Alexander says, loved your Galadriel videos. Absolutely brilliant work. Cheers from Moscow. Glad I found your channel. Well, thanks for watching them. Yeah, that I could have done a video and talked about the problems of Galadriel as a character, but there were tons of those on YouTube. Everybody talking about how Galadriel was, oh, she's wrong. She's a Mary Sue. She's got all these problems. I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna. It's just such great stuff to work with. Like, I'll just rip the piss out of it. So I made those satirical videos about her, and they work quite well. And even the music for it, because the music that you have in Rings of Power, it's just this really generic, shitty fantasy music. And ironically, the Guardian, who I hate, said it best. It was like the composer fell asleep at his keyboard with his finger on the fantasy demo. That's what the music sounds like. But when I was using music for Galadriel in my videos, I used this really harsh, modernist, dissonant music. It's Penderecki. If anyone knows who that composer is, he's a Polish composer. He's very good, and it worked brilliantly. It really reflected the twisted mind of this absolute psychopath that is Galadriel. El Claudio says, well, also greetings from Mexico. Your videos were very good. Thank you very much, El Claudio. All right, so let's see if we can press on and talk a little bit about Cleopatra. The fam without a face, if you do get your audio working, just talk, and hopefully I will be able to hear you. Okay, so like I said, broadly speaking, it's a political hit job. And
can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you now. How are you? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Well, now I can't hear you for some reason.
All right, can the chat hear me? Or is my mic now muted? We can hear him. Can you hear me? Stephen Russo, can you hear me? Sorry about the technical problems, guys. We hear both. Okay, they hear both. All right. So, as I was saying, talking about Cleopatra. So the first problem I noticed was obfuscation. Basically, their plan to convince the viewers that Cleopatra was indeed a black woman is to obfuscate. So obfuscation is where you basically throw out a word salad of nonsense to try to confuse people, and then you implant the idea in the midst of all that confusion. So I'll give you an example. let's say you're staring at a really shitty work of art. It's just a bunch of black lines and some paint thrown onto a canvas. And someone says, "Oh yeah, the way the colors kind of blend together to form this, it's almost like an essentialist perspective on the existentialist experience of retrograde perception." If someone says that, that's called obfuscation. They're trying to confuse the issue by just throwing out a big word salad of nonsense. Now, what they do in Cleopatra is they say, well, skin color in Egypt ranged from dark brown, like black, to, light brown. And we think Cleopatra kind of landed somewhere in between all that. That's obfuscation. They know perfectly well that she was a Greek woman, that she came from the Ptolemies, the dynasty of the Ptolemies. And so they said, well, there were these different colors in Egypt, and there was a range of skin colors, and we don't exactly know who her grandparents were. And so that was their opening. That was what they were going to do at the start. They were going to obfuscate. Can you hear me now, Fan Without a Face? Okay, I'll just let him work on his technical issues. All right, so there was the obfuscation, and they then made the assertion that Cleopatra looks different to all of us. She looks different depending on the period that she's depicted. And one
Okay,
guy said,
sorry, I think I got the sound thing figured out.
"Have you got it figured out? Can you hear me?"
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. I'll just finish this point. So one guy said, "Oh, we imagine her, and I imagine her as having skin like mine and similar hair, and he's a vaguely mixed race man. He looks Arabic or like 1/3 black or a quarter black or something like that. He's this ethnic looking guy, and he that was complete bullshit. Like, you don't imagine history, you discover history. And for the parts of history that you're not sure about, you infer, right? You infer from the evidence, but you don't imagine. When you start to imagine history, what you have is historical fiction or historical fantasy, and that's fine. There's a genre for that. There is a genre for historical fiction where you do a lot of research, you take a period of history, and then you place a character in there, and it didn't really happen, but it could have happened. It's just to get an idea of it. A really good book series that does that is 24 Hours in Ancient Greece, 24 Hours in Ancient Rome, 24 Hours in Ancient Egypt. That's a really fun book series that does that. That's where they imagine people in these historical fictive environments, but you can't do that with a historical docudrama unless you're presenting it as historical fiction, which this isn't. This is presented as historical fact, and yet you have a guy saying, "I imagine that she looked like me." You can't do that. You can't imagine historical figures when you're speaking about them in a genuine, truthful academic sense. So that was he shouldn't have said that. That was really non-academic, and yeah, just bullshit. It was obfuscative, and it was a lie, plain and simple. And judging by the 2% Rotten Tomato score and the 0.1 that it has on Metacritic, nobody bought it. So I'm glad. I will get to I've got extensive notes on Cleopatra, which I'll get to. But I first want to thank the Fan Without a Face for coming in. So how are you?
I'm doing all right. Sorry about the whole communication thing. This is the first time I've used this, and I'm using a different computer right now, so I was surprised it wouldn't connect at first, but I've got it now, so I'm at least glad I can take part in this because I was looking forward to this for a bit.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. And the Fan Without a Face does have a YouTube channel. There's a link for it in the description if you want to check it out. So, and don't worry about the technical difficulties. My last stream I did on this had really bad audio because the mic, I just set it up wrong. So don't worry about it. You get better at these things over time. It happens, especially when you're using a new platform. All right. So Cody, I'm going to try to set up. I'm trying to set up a wee banner here on the video just to improve it a bit. So can you just briefly discuss what you thought of Cleopatra?
I only watched the first episode, and I thought it was very, for one thing, kind of boring. I'm not as much of a history expert as you are, so I'm not that familiar with certain things, but I definitely felt, I watched the first episode and it felt very dragged out. it just felt like there was a lot of there was a lot of talking, a lot of back and forth, but it wasn't engaging, so to speak. And some parts of it really felt heavy-handed. Like she kept talking. They put a lot of emphasis on Cleopatra is so impressive. She's so great. She's the first woman to do this and all that. And it just felt like they focused mostly on that and not much else. And like you said, some of the stuff that some of the back and forth talking about, this is how I imagined Cleopatra, or this is how I thought she should be, and all that stuff. It's like you can do that with, that's fine for when you're making like a fictional version of the character, but it's a different story when you're doing it for somebody who there are statues and entire courses and everything else done about who she was, what she looked like, and all that other stuff. It's essentially saying that you know better than thousands and thousands of years of recorded history that prove otherwise. And it really does feel like they're just trying to insert themselves into actual history, and they're acting surprised when they not only offend people who made it their entire career studying this sort of thing, but also an entire country who obviously they would probably know a lot more about this than you, especially that one lady who said whose grandmother told her that she thought she apparently knew better than them. Like, was your was I'm sorry, was your grandmother an Egyptologist? Was she a history expert? Was she, does she have any qualifications that back up her claim other than she says so? Because that only works on the playground.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually gives the lie to it, because I was doing quite a bit of research into this Cleopatra was black myth. And one thing I picked up on, there was a probably the one of the best things that summed it up was a historian who said, we don't really know where the idea that Cleopatra was black took off or why. It's just one of those things that someone said at some point and then it just took on a life of its own. And that's me basically paraphrasing what the historian said, but he said it's basically a folk myth that originated in the United States and took on a life of its own. And when she said, my grandmother told me, I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black. Like when that gives the lie to the fact that this is just a folk myth. It's an Afrocentric folk myth, probably emerged in the 60s during the civil rights era. The Malcolm X, those types of people who would have preferred his way of looking at things. He was an Afrocentrist. He was very, because I've read his autobiography, he was very excited about all of these archaeological discoveries that were going on in Africa. And he was very excited about potentially finding this great African civilization that had been hidden and that had been hidden away from black people to keep them down. And blacks had been lied to about their history. And he was good faith, though. I would say he was a good faith Afrocentrist. He was a seeker of truth. The problem was that the stuff he was reading was just such utter shite that he genuinely believed it. But I think that the people who are doing this now, the people that are doing this now, they're bad faith actors. They know for a fact that Cleopatra was not black. They are doing this for modern political reasons. This is an attack on history for modern Western political reasons. And I will go through the historical distortions in this thing just that I picked up on from my own. And I don't have an in-depth knowledge of ancient Rome. I know some about ancient Rome. I've read some about it. My historical knowledge is mostly 20th century. I like the Napoleonic era. I've read a lot about that, Irish history, but I don't know. I know a lot about the Nazis, but I don't know a lot about ancient Rome. I know a bit about it, though. Sorry, go ahead.
It's kind of funny because, well, when I was a kid, I watched a lot of old black and white horror movies, and The Mummy was obviously one of those. And I also watched the 1990 Brendan Fraser The Mummy, and that actually made me a lot more interested in ancient Egyptian culture, or at the very least, the mythology. I'm not an expert, of course, but I definitely felt like one thing this movie came up short was it definitely lacked that Egyptian aesthetic to it, because the way the characters look, the way the characters were dressed, and the way all the sets looked and everything, it really didn't feel like what you imagine ancient Egypt to look like. It just looked like they just picked whatever random area they could think of, what was close enough or something to it. And I just felt that that kind of also dragged it down because it made things less interesting looking. But that's just me.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like they tried way too hard to make Cleopatra seem like this unbeatable all around great person, especially during those brief scenes where they show her sword fighting, because I did a little bit of research on this. And while I know Cleopatra was a lot of things, she was intelligent, charismatic, a decent tactician. I don't remember hearing anywhere that she could fight, and nothing I've saw suggested that she had any kind of combat training. So it really does feel like they included that in there just to emphasize that she was this great girl boss character, even though
Yeah, that was
even if
just
they
the
had been
guard power moment, and that was part of. I'll just briefly go through. This is the historical distortions that I noticed in the docu series. There's one point at which I'll just call them talking heads, or you could also call them skintellectuals, who are the people who they have on the show to talk about the history of ancient Egypt. And to be fair, I did research on them. They're all qualified, but I'll get onto them in a little bit. Um, Basically, this is the historical inaccuracies. For one of them says, "At this time, Rome is the emerging power." That's the quote. Rome is the emerging power. Rome was not an emerging power by this time. Rome dominated Europe. There was no one in Europe that could possibly challenge Rome. Carthage had been destroyed long before, and Rome was in total control of the Mediterranean. It was Mare Nostrum, which literally means our sea. The Romans owned it. They had total dominance of the Mediterranean. They weren't an up and coming power or an emerging power. They were the power, probably the strongest country in the world. Certainly within that part of the world, Europe and the Near East was their world. There was nowhere else that could even challenge them except the Parthian Empire. The Parthian Empire could resist them, but it couldn't necessarily take anything away from them. So they weren't an emerging power. They were a dominant power. Someone else, they talked about how the Nile not flooding wasn't Cleopatra's fault when she came into power because they needed the Nile to flood to get the crops. But they failed to mention that it would have been regarded as being her fault by the people, because their attitude was that when the Nile does not flood, that means the gods are unhappy with the current ruler, with something that the ruler has done, or that the ruler has not paid necessary homage to the gods. That wasn't mentioned. That was just skipped over. There was no religious aspect, like the religious. I can't even say skull. There was no mention of religion at all in this. It was pathetic.
That
It
that
was
was that
utterly
was
pathetic.
that was actually something I'd noticed too. One thing that is important to remember about civilizations like ancient Rome, ancient Greece, and ancient Egypt is that the gods were effectively a humongous part of their everyday life. Every time something happened, whether it was good or bad or anything like that, they usually attributed to like the gods, whether they're happy, sad, and all that sort of thing. And they always consulted the gods in everything. And here it's almost like, and the ancient Egyptians have like one of the most well-known pantheons of gods in all of history, and yet for some reason even in the first episode they barely mention ancient Egyptian religion at all. The most we got was that one scene with the bull, and even there it's like a footnote and it's just ridiculous. Even freaking Assassin's Creed Origins did a better job of associating ancient Egyptian mythology and religion with actual ancient Egypt, and Cleopatra's actually in that game, and she actually feels more accurate in a video game where she's only in a couple of cutscenes compared to this show that is literally all about her. I mean, what does that say?
Well, I mean, to me, what that says is the fact that they had a political goal in mind, and everything else they just left by the wayside. By the way, Saifoa, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, just gave me $2.99. It says A. I don't know what A is. Maybe that's Aussie dollars. I'm not sure, but $2.99. So thank you very much, Saifoa. All right. So another thing they got wrong. This is the feminist thing coming in. So when one of the talking heads, the skintellectuals, was describing why there was a civil war in Rome, she said, "There's a civil war in Rome, and it's two men. It's Pompey and it's Caesar. Two men, right? This is absurd. Of course, it's two men. It's ancient Rome. It's hardly going to be a woman. Like this is Rome. Women don't have armies. So why would you just say two men? You should say something like it's two patricians, or it's two. It's in this case it was two military generals. It was Caesar who had conquered Gaul, and it was Pompey who had conquered Greece, and they were having basically a civil war for reasons that I won't get into, and which, but incidentally, the documentary did not get into. It just glosses over everything. It doesn't say two military generals. It should have said two very celebrated, victorious military generals, Caesar and Pompey. Caesar had conquered Gaul, modern day France, and Pompey had conquered Greece and Turkey. what is modern day Greece and Turkey and north of Greece. But none of this is mentioned. None of it is mentioned. Another one was that Cleopatra says Egypt will not be just a mere colony. Egypt wouldn't have been made a colony; it would have been made a province. Another one. This one offended me personally. Why wasn't Caesar bald? Caesar was balding, and in this show he has too much hair. I felt, as a man who started to lose his hair as a teenager, I felt like I couldn't see myself in this documentary because Caesar had too much hair, and it's like they've hair swapped him. With little white girls can't see themselves in Ariel anymore because she was race swapped. So now only little black girls can see themselves reflected back at themselves when they watch LAR17, live action remake 18. I was offended because I couldn't see myself in this documentary in the bald Caesar, one of the great bald men of history, taken away from me. I was devastated.
Oh, look out, streamers. The Despot has played the reverse Uno card on the directors.
And another one was, oh man, this was another one. One of the talking heads said she was an African woman. Now, this is wordplay. This is obfuscation through semantic wordplay. That's what that is. Yes, she was born on the continent of Africa, so technically she was an African woman in that sense. But we know, and the talking head who said that knows that's not really what she knows. That's not what the meaning that is going to be communicated to the viewer is.
Yeah.
Right. She knows that the viewer is going to hear that. She's going to hear the word African woman and think, oh, she was a black woman. And it's really sneaky. It's such a slimy thing to do. And it's very deliberate.
It's kind of like how when people get offended when you say Elon Musk was African, because technically that's also true. He was born in Africa, so technically he's an African. But because he's not black, people don't consider him an African, which I always found kind of silly. I mean, if you're born in that country, regardless of what you look like, that technically makes you that, because that's the country you were born in, and in most cases, that's where you were raised in. So technically, that's what you are.
Well, the Duke of Wellington was once accused of being Irish because he was born and raised in Dublin, but he was born and raised in Dublin within an Anglo family, within an English-speaking, basically a colonial family living in Dublin. And when he was accused of this in the House of Commons, his reply was, being born in a stable doesn't make you a horse, which I think was a legitimate reply. I wouldn't regard the Duke of Wellington as being Irish. Even though he was born and raised there, he was born and raised within a very closed little English bubble. Do you know what I mean?
I suppose that does technically make a difference. Like, even if you're born in the country but you're raised a certain way, like around a different culture, then that would kind of make you that way. I guess culture kind of boils down to both where you're born but also how you're raised, because
there is nuance in identity. It's not just where you're born. Because I mean, if you're born at sea, like what are you? You're not a fish. You're not a mermaid. You know what I mean? There is nuance there, but your point still stands. Another one was there's no details about the war. So, and this was left out deliberately. So, Caesar, I know this because I read a book before. When I saw that Cleopatra was coming out, I read a book about that period of history called the Battle Actium, the battle that made the Roman Empire. It's a very good book. I would recommend it, actually. I really enjoyed it. So I was able to do a bit of background reading, and there is no mention of the fact that Caesar and Cleopatra were besieged inside Cleopatra's palace in Alexandria for a year. So her brother Ptolemy the 13th got an army together of about 20,000 Egyptians and mercenaries, not just Egyptians, and they besieged the palace, but they couldn't take it because Caesar had about 4,000 Romans, and he was defending Cleopatra, and the only thing standing between Cleopatra and this army led by her brother was Caesar's men and Caesar. Now, you can't have that in the documentary because that means that she was saved by a man. And we can't have Cleopatra being saved by a man because she's a boss bitch. All right. She is a slay queen boss bitch. And we can't have Caesar and his 4,000 gruff, experienced soldiers holding off this massive army who want to go in there and do things to her that I would get banned on YouTube for for
I
describing.
I always hate that women can't have moments of vulnerability, yet also be tough. To go on a little bit of a tangent, from anime I watch called One Piece, there's a character who's a princess of, ironically, an Egyptian country, a Princess Vivi of Alabasta. She's a princess herself, and she is portrayed as competent, intelligent, resourceful, and also compassionate. She goes out of her way to protect her country from this particular pirate who's trying to take it over. And while she's shown to be a lot of those things, and she's even capable at fighting in times, she still has to rely on other people to help her because she can't do everything herself. It shows that while it's perfectly okay to be resourceful and strong and still ask for help, because one person does not make an army. And it's a good moment in the story. It shows that she can take some of the burden off herself and rely on other people. And I feel like that message is just lost because you set these unrealistic expectations for these people, that you can do literally everything and you can't rely on anybody. That's just, it just makes them less human. It makes them caricatures
It
because
does. It means you can't relate to them and you can't become emotionally invested in them.
yeah, and it just bugs me like that because I mean, that's part of what you're supposed to do with people in these kinds of things: make them relatable, make them easier to connect with. And when you make this character so flawless, it's pretty much impossible to connect with them. It's the same reason people had problems with characters like Ray, because she was so perfect and so good at everything that, well, I mean, no one is that good at everything all at once. That just takes away the fun of it.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is that that siege that they skipped over, where they were besieged for a year inside Cleopatra's palace, her and Caesar. That siege was ended when Caesar's reinforcements arrived, and his reinforcements and then the army he had defending the palace crushed Ptolemy's army, and Ptolemy was drowned in the Nile. None of this is mentioned. Like, none of it is mentioned. It's completely glossed over. The way it's described in the documentary, it makes it seem like Cleopatra defeated Ptolemy with her own army. That you would assume that just listening to the documentary. There's no mention of the fact that it was like 15 to 20,000 Roman soldiers that did this. There's just no mention of it.
And it would have been kind of fun to point that out, because it would show like the difference in skill level between like the Roman soldiers and the Egyptian soldiers. Because what little I've ever heard about ancient Rome is that their army was often depicted as like the best in the entire world. So even if they're outnumbered, they can usually win battles that seem to be unwinnable in situations like that. And that's always kind of fun to see. But I get the feeling they didn't either have the money for that kind of a big battle scene, or they just didn't want to do it because they thought that wouldn't be as interesting or
Well, they
something
did.
like that.
They didn't even mention it, and you would have thought, well, okay, you don't have the money for the 4,000 Roman soldiers and the 20,000 Egyptians. Fair enough, but Caesar and Cleopatra were besieged inside a palace for a year. That, I mean, maybe do an episode on that. Nah, not interested. The other thing was that they claimed the Western. So this is part of the Afrocentrism element. They have now claimed the Western calendar. So everyone, we are. I just want to inform you that the Western calendar, the 365-day calendar, is now black. It belongs to Africans, and I just wanted to let you know that, because in this documentary, what happens is we discover that Caesar only adopted the 365-day calendar under the influence of Cleopatra. And because she was black and everyone in Egypt was black, because literally they've race swapped all of Egypt, most people in Egypt are black in this documentary, which means that the Western calendar came from black Africans. It's
Ugh.
stolen from them, and it was appropriated from them, so that belongs to them now. So just keep that in mind.
Of course. I don't even get why they do this. I mean, Africa as as a continent has so much potential for interesting stories, interesting legends, interesting people, interesting history and achievements and inventions and all that stuff. Why can't you actually just focus on that stuff instead of making stuff up? I just don't understand it. It's like saying these achievements from Africa aren't as interesting or as impressive. Let's say they invented this more well-known stuff because it's more interesting. It's basically like slapping their history in the face almost. It's like they're
Yeah,
ashamed of it.
it is. It's ridiculous, and it's like you said. There are great stories there, and there's great folk tales and everything. There's a famous battle in which the Zulus crushed the British and they killed 2,000 British soldiers. It was a massive defeat.
Oh
It was
yeah,
one of the great shocks of the scramble for Africa. It was one of the great shocks of that period.
yeah. That
And they have
was
a
a.
movie about it in the I think it was in the 60s, Zulu, which is an amazing movie.
I saw it. It's a very good movie, and I like how even though both sides technically you could argue the Zulus are technically the bad guys in the movie, they're still shown as respectful and honorable. I especially like the sing off scene between the two armies near the end of the movie. But I do know what you're talking about. I've seen it. The army has cannons, guns, and bombs and all that other stuff, and yet they still get wiped out. It's one of the few times where a modern army loses to a bunch of guys armed with sticks and spears.
Yeah, there were reasons for that, though. The British weren't properly prepared. Their logistics were set up very poor. Yeah, Michael Caine was in that. Cyril Furr says, and they hadn't got their ammunition ready. Very arrogant. Just they were arrogant, and they got wiped out as a result. And yeah, so I mean, I could go on all day about Cleopatra. The other thing is, it looks like shit. Like the production quality of this is crap. Like for example, Caesar. Caesar looks utterly pathetic. He's got this soldier's garb on, but it's too big for him. Like the sleeves on it are like this. It's really pathetic looking. Like the richest man in Rome can't afford a decent uniform, and it just looks like it's been pulled out of a closet on a movie set. It's bloody awful. It looks so low budget, and they've used these cheats to try to depict to try to get away with the fact that it is just low production quality, low budget. For example, whenever they're filming ancient Rome or ancient Alexandria, there's no wide shots because they can't afford wide shots. So it's all close-ups. It'll be one little peasant lady with a chicken, and it's a big close-up on her. Because if they zoom out, you'll see they'll see the movie set. Or you'll have three guys walking together, and it's a big close-up, and there's lots of close-ups on faces, and it's to hide just how bad this looks. That they're trying to hide just how shit this thing looks, and it looks bad. It's so ugly. It's pathetic looking.
I also noticed that the lack of gold on Cleopatra and some of the Egyptians, because that's like one of the more common things you see in a lot of depictions of of Egyptians in high society. They would often wear all kinds of gold jewelry and everything else and elaborate stuff. But most of the time they just show Cleopatra with like maybe an earring or two and that hair, that really bushy hair.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on ancient Egypt, like I said, but I'm pretty sure she didn't have hair like that. If only just because I can imagine how in a time without air conditioning or suntan lotion or anything else like that to protect you from the sun, that would burn your scalp up real fast or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it or
Now,
something.
her hair was really boring. Like the hair and makeup's really boring in the show. She basically just has a messy afro the whole time. You don't get any like if you ever watch that TV show Rome, which is great. They have these really cool, funky, old-fashioned hairstyles that they had in ancient Egypt, and it's really fun. But the entire time, she just has a big messy afro, and that's all she has.
It's boring.
It's boring as hell. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like
The other, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you look at all the statues and everything else depicting all the different things that ancient Egyptians would wear, the headdresses, the jeweled bangs, and the sort of bob cut haircuts, and all the makeup and tattoos and everything. Again, going back to the mummy, they show all kinds of cool stuff in that. And here they're just walking around in white robes and not much else. And it almost feels like they didn't have the budget for anything else, which is really sad.
Yeah, I want to move on from Cleopatra. The last thing I will say about it is that the acting was terrible. It's really bad. It's super melodramatic, like cheesy soap opera bad. I'll just give one example of it. When the first scene you see Caesar, he's speaking in dramatic whispers. Why are you here? Why have you come? How can I trust you? He's speaking like that. It's really amateur acting like an amateur who thinks that's how you sound dramatic. It's terrible.
Yeah, they definitely came across as very flat. Like Cleopatra basically talks, I am Cleopatra, and you will listen to me as I speak in this haunty tone that makes it sound like I have my nose shoved high up in the air, and that I think I'm better than everybody else. And I am your loyal servant, and I will talk to you in this slightly submissive tone that shows that while I respect you, and that I instantly agree with everything that you say.
Yeah, that's basically it. And people have been saying online, "Oh, the girl that played Cleopatra was really good." She wasn't. She was shit. She did this basically kind of amateur impersonation of what she thought majesty was, and majesty is basically haughtiness and speaking as if she's in a haunted house, like the way you just did it, like it's a haunted house. She was probably the best actor in the show. I'll give her that, but she was still pretty mediocre at best. It's
And
just that everyone around her was so bad that they were making her look good. She wasn't good.
I think the thing that also bugged me was the dialogue they had them speaking. Most
Oh,
of
wait, wait, wait.
like
I've got an example. I must, because I actually wrote this down word for word. Here's an example of some of the dialogue from Cleopatra. And forgive me, I'm going to try to do the voices because it's between a man and a woman, and I've got to give you an idea of who's who. So this is between Antony and Cleopatra. Cleopatra speaks first. Why are you here? I'm here because you win. Win what? Everything. Can I really trust you? That is the level of dialogue in this show.
that sounds like something out of a video game cutscene, but
It sounds like a video game cutscene written by a 14-year-old.
I think the thing that also bugs me is the way they speak. A lot of there are scenes where they literally talk like modern day people, or at least they sound like modern day people. The word choice, the way they speak, you imagine that the way people in ancient cultures would speak, it's a bit more refined, and their word choice is more eloquent and intellectual and such, especially when you consider that these are supposed to be really intelligent people because the show beats you over the head over and over
Yeah.
again with how smart Cleopatra is. But the way she talks sometimes, it's like a petulant teenager. I remember there was something like, come now, the fun times are ahead, I believe, something along those lines. And I'm like, are you kidding? I'm sorry, is this ancient Egypt or a high school production of ancient Egypt?
Yeah, it was bad, man. It was really bad. But we could talk about this piece of garbage all day. Look, it's got what it's deserved. The backlash has been beautiful to watch. Last thing I'll say is I do not know what the fuck Netflix were thinking. This was dumb. It was stupid. And hopefully they'll learn a lesson. But I don't know. What do you think? Will Netflix take their L and move on from this disaster, or are they gonna?
Well, let me put it to
What
you
do you-
this way, Despot. If they didn't take the L after Cuties, then I don't think this is going to be it either, even if they did manage to successfully piss off not only historians, but an entire country. You have to
yeah.
try to piss off an entire country by saying you know their culture better than they do, and you still think you have the moral high ground. Even the actress herself still thinks that she has a point, that she's right. How full of yourself do you have to be to think that you know Egyptian culture better than Egyptians?
Yeah,
It's amazing.
it's
It's amazing.
disgraceful. And look, I'm glad that the Egyptians pushed back on this. There was like the Attorney General sued Netflix or something. So I'm glad to see that Egyptians were as disgusted as everybody else was, and I'm glad that Egyptians didn't just let this slide. They actually were very vocal in their opposition to this utter trash. So fair play to Egypt. That was a W for them. Big, nice, fat, shiny ale for Netflix. They got what they deserved, and I'm glad to see this getting 2% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah,
All
you
right, so
know it.
we're go
uh,
ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you know it's bad when even Rotten Tomatoes gives you a bad score.
Yeah, even the critics on Rotten Tomatoes give it like 14%. No one likes this garbage. All right, so we'll just check in with the chat before we move on to the next topic. So, Gareth
Just a
Smith says, "Glad you mentioned Rome." Yeah, Rome's a cracking show. If you're kind of stuck and you don't really know what TV show to watch, check out Rome, especially if you like history. But even if you don't like history, it's just so fun. The acting is brilliant, excellent production design, really good battle scenes. They really go into the religion and the morality of the Roman Empire and the sexuality and everything. It's excellent. And they really go for the details. Like the details are important when you're depicting ancient history, and they really go in for it. So if you are interested in a really good historical show, Rome is great. Check it out if you haven't watched it.
And
Um,
if you're
yeah, go
looking for
ahead.
something that's a little bit more of a better representation of Egypt, or at the very least presents it in a more dignified way, there's a lot of ways you can do it. There's a lot of Egyptian documentaries you could watch, say the older Cleopatra movies. Those are well beloved for obvious reasons. Or if you want to get a firsthand experience, you really should try Assassin's Creed Origins, even if it is historical fiction on some respect to some extent, it really does depict Egypt in a more beautiful way. It is visually stunning. The pyramids look great, the characters are great, and you really do get a feel for the culture. And ancient Egypt is a really great and interesting culture to learn about the mythology, the history, and everything else. Don't let this show close you off from it, because it is great. And I only wish that I wish I knew more about it. I actually once when I was a kid, I thought about becoming an Egyptologist just because I thought it was so fascinating. But obviously, that never happened.
Yeah. So Lemon 2007 says the Super Mario Bros. Movie was more historically accurate. That is probably true. I mean, it is historically accurate in the sense that it is depicting video games from the past, and it depicts them fairly accurately. So that's certainly true. Um, let's have a look. Classic dialogue. Noel Karen says, and there's your dialogue. Classic in it. Classic stuff, yeah. I swear to God, I would love to know if there exists a person who managed to get through all 4 episodes of Cleopatra, because I just gave up 2.5 episodes in. It's just utter dreck. It's almost impossible to watch. And I
I
got through all
imagine
episodes of The Mandalorian, and that's bad, man. Sorry, what were you
I
saying?
imagine I imagine some people did, because if they were paid, but they must have been paid a lot of money, or they must have had a gun to their head if they sat through all 4 episodes at once.
You'd have to, man. It's so bad. It's utter shite. Hey, Greg Owens in the chat. How you doing, Greg? He says, "Sorry, you're on the FBI watch list now." I probably am on the FBI watch list because I posed Afrocentrism, and I said that they didn't actually invent the 365-day calendar, but who isn't on the FBI watch list? I think at this stage, half the American population is on the FBI watch list, so I may as well join the party. All right. So let's move on to our next topic. Just give me a wee second here, and I will consult my notes.
Oh, hey, Grego.
I think after talking about Cleopatra, I need to talk about something positive. So I reckon Guardians 3,
Oh, yeah. That was
and
good.
I'll just let you take off with this one because I did see it and I've got some good thoughts on it. But yeah, just let me know what your thoughts on it first.
When it comes to the Guardians of the Galaxy, I've always had a mixed kind of feeling, because the first time I was ever introduced to them was in an episode of Earth's Mightiest Heroes, the Avengers cartoon that came out right before the MCU, which, in my humble opinion, was way better at doing the whole Marvel Extended Universe thing. But there, the Guardians were mostly depicted as a pretty competent, group of superheroes. Peter Quill wasn't cracking jokes. Rocket was more trigger happy. Groot was pretty much the same, but they came across as a very competent group of people. So when I saw them as this collection of somewhat clowns in the first movie, I was a little disappointed, but I've gradually grown to enjoy them. And this third movie, I definitely feel like it's a pretty good bookend to their story. It definitely feels like they're treated with more respect than it's in some cases some of the other characters. Peter Quill, for one thing, in the previous 2 movies, he almost acted like a man-child, screwing around, goofing around, making quips, and getting smacked around all the time. But here, he's actually portrayed as much more competent. I think they're trying to imply that everything that happened with Infinity War and Gamora and everything else really had an impact on him, and he's trying to be more serious to avoid stuff like that, which I do appreciate. And the stuff with Rocket and his backstory is genuinely engaging. And as with the High Evolutionary, he definitely is one of the more memorable bad guys, because you despise this guy. He is just so full of himself in the worst way possible, and he thinks that he knows everything. And when he gets upstaged by a raccoon, he just throws a hissy fit throughout the rest of the movie. And while he's not the most intimidating villain, he's at least memorable, which is a lot more than I can say for like 80% of the villains. And it's definitely darker than the past ones, and they really do make the Guardians feel like a cohesive unit, like Space Avengers. They really feel like kind of like the Avengers from the first movie. Actually, they do throw jokes around, and some of them do drag on in some places. Some of the jokes are a bit cringy, like Peter tries to hit on this one lady to get information, and the joke is, oh, okay, he's gonna hit on her and he's gonna strike out. Goody goody, this is gonna drag on for 5 minutes. Well, I guess I can go to the bathroom. And but overall, I felt like it was a really good movie, and I thought that it was it was a lot better than it had any right to be. And I'm glad that this is how it ends for the Guardians, even if it is a little sad that this is how it ends for the Guardians. But that's what I think.
Yeah, just before I give my thoughts on it, Greg Owen is in the chat. He has a really great channel, everybody. So Subscribe to Greg Owen. He does some fantastic videos. He did a really good video recently on Disney, which you
Yeah,
should go check out. Oh,
diagnosing Disney.
yeah, he's diagnosing the terminal illness at Disney. All right, so Guardians 3, I thought it was a good, entertaining movie, and if you don't ask too much of it, you'll like it. If you want it to be as good as Guardians 1, you'll be disappointed because it's not. And I think that's almost impossible. It's exceptionally rare that a third movie in a trilogy is as good as the first movie, right? And I mean, Back to the Future, which is my favorite trilogy, the first one is definitely the best. I really like all three. And I think the third one's cool. They tried to do something a little different, give it a
Oh yeah,
Western feel. But
I
the
I
first one's definitely the best.
I I definitely enjoy part 3 as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just love the Back to the Future movies, and I feel like Back to the Future 3 is really good because they really take advantage of the whole time travel aspect by putting them in a completely
Yeah.
foreign environment rather than just same place, but just a few decades back.
Yeah, they did
It's something.
something different.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry,
and
but
and it's hard to do that. It's taking a risk with the third movie, and rather than trying to go for a really futurist thing or a nostalgia thing, let's go back to the 60s because we can do the 60s nostalgia, which is what they would probably do today. They instead decided, no, let's do something really original. Let's go way back and we'll try to merge modernity with we'll have modernity in the West, and they really played off the humor of that, and it worked really well. Another one is Star Wars Return of the Jedi is regarded as definitely the weakest of the original trilogy, which it is. I still think it's a very good movie, and the Ewoks I'm not a big fan of. I don't think anyone is, but I still think it's a good movie, and
I don't
the
mind the
director did a
Ewoks.
pretty good job with the Ewoks. Obviously, George Lucas wanted to sell toys, and he gave the director a poison chalice and said, "Drink it." And the director did a pretty good job incorporating them into the movie. So overall, some of Return of the Jedi is excellent. Like the throne room scenes between Luke, Vader, and the Emperor are maybe that's doesn't get much better than that in terms of Star Wars. The battle where the Death Star ambushes the Rebel fleet, and then they engage the Star Destroyers. Like that's just brilliant. So it ranges in quality from Star Wars at its best, or among the best that you will get in the original trilogy, among the best scenes to Ewoks basically, which is pretty good overall. And I love the opening, the whole Jabba's palace sequence. I think is brilliant, and it makes perfect sense. Anybody says it doesn't make sense, they need to watch my video on it.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember that video. That was funny.
yeah, it makes sense. It does make sense. Like once you realize, and it's really well written. It's exactly what would have happened, how I describe it. Um, okay, so we'll just have another wee glance at the chat here. Yeah, Greg, I admire your work. Just watched your series on Disney this morning. So Andrew Vasquez has been enjoying Greg's channel, which is great. And the other trilogies that I wanted to mention, just to show that the third movie is very difficult to make. Basically, pick your trilogy. I mean, Die Hard as well. You could never get back to the quality of the first one, so you can't really be too hard on the Guardians for not really knocking it out of the park with the third movie there. It's a good movie, and for a third movie in a trilogy, which, like I said, historically, it's really hard to make a quality third movie in a trilogy. They did a pretty damn good job of it. Now, it's not to say there's not problems. There are problems with it.
I was just going to mention that with it comes to trilogies, you forgot to mention one of the ones with the best third installment, The Lord of the Rings.
I was the reason I didn't mention Lord of the Rings is because I don't really think of Lord of the Rings as a trilogy. I tend to think of it as basically one gigantic movie split into 3 parts, which is how it was filmed.
I guess that's true, though it kind of feels like a technicality at that point. But
It's a technicality, but like I said, I wouldn't. I mean, you can regard it as a trilogy. I wouldn't say it's a trilogy in the same sense that Back to the Future is a trilogy, whereby they had to go back and figure out, a new idea for each movie. It was thought of as basically one giant movie that would be shown in 3 parts. Anyway, the problems in Guardians, for me, the biggest problem was the music. I felt it was out of place. It was far too intrusive. So the music is supposed to blend really well with the action on screen, and it's supposed to match up with the emotion. that the movie is eliciting from the viewer. And it didn't do that for me. I felt that the music was out of place. It didn't match the actions on screen. And I don't just mean the physical actions, it just didn't match the pace. Sometimes there would be a spaceship going out, and the pace of the music, the tempo was just wrong. It didn't fit. And the emotional emphasis that the music was trying to, it didn't hit right. The
It
musical supervision was very poor here. I think what happened was James Gunn basically finished his movie, and then he thought, right, now I'm going to put in all these songs I like, and they don't work very well. Sometimes it's a hit, but mostly I think he misses.
I think part of the
Go
problem
ahead.
is that after the first movie, they made such a big deal about including classic 60s and 70s music into certain scenes that basically became part of the, I want to say, the Disney trademarked version of the Guardians. They basically are all about including classic old-fashioned music in a bunch of different wacky situations, and so they assumed everyone would come in expecting that, so they just decided to cram as much music into this one as possible because that
Cram
they
is the
figured,
right word.
yeah, because they figured the audience is going to be expecting it, so might as well shove as much music into every scene that we can possibly do it, no matter whether it fits or whether it doesn't.
Yeah, and this is coming from someone who, loves music. I studied music at university. I was in a band for years, and I recorded 2 albums and love music. Absolutely love music. I listen to a vast breadth of music going back hundreds of years, and I'm telling you, the music in this movie just doesn't work. The other thing is that the music they chose, the songs they chose. Now, I don't want to sound like an arrogant prick or anything, but I have a very good knowledge of pop music history, basically from the 50s to the present. And I did not recognize most of these songs. Like this shit, the reason it's just bad. The music's bad. Long story short, it's second rate crap. It's B grade. Some of it's decent. Like there's a couple of good tunes in there, but most of it, I mean, it's not terrible, but there's a reason no one knows what these songs are. Like I've got a list here. I mean, "Creep" by Radiohead, obviously, I knew that. That was probably my favorite song in it. "Crazy on You" by Heart, "Since You've Been Gone," Rainbow, "In the Meantime," Space Hog, "Reasons," Earth, Wind and Fire, "Do You Realize," The Flaming Lips, "We Care a Lot," Faith No More. Some like I'm Always Chasing Rainbows by Alice Cooper, "San Francisco," The Mowgli's, "Poor Girl," X, "This Is the Day," The. "No Sleep Till Brooklyn" by the Beastie Boys, which to be fair is a good song. "Dog Days Are Over," which I absolutely fucking despise. I hate Florence and the Machine. But these are just some of the songs that are in there, and I bet as I'm reading them, the vast majority of the people listening to this don't know which one's the song name and which one's the band name. They're so obscure, and the reason they're obscure is because they're shite. They've been forgotten by history for good reason. They're no good. They're second rate at best, except for one or two.
Well,
Um,
to be
it's
fair,
just it's their
some of the
stuff.
songs from the previous movies weren't that well known. I'm pretty sure most people hadn't heard of "Hooked on a Feeling" until the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer came out. So,
But I mean, it's almost like it thinks that this movie thinks that with the music that they're putting in, they're like Quentin Tarantino, like we're gonna revive these old songs that people have forgotten about, but they're actually really good. In this case, these are old songs that people have mostly forgotten about, but they've forgotten about them because they're crap. So the music to me was just James Gunn taking a big dump all over this movie. This movie could have been so much better if the music had been right. For me, that was the main problem. Now, that's not to say all of the music was bad. Just the overall quality wasn't great, and the couple of good songs they did have there weren't used properly. I also felt the movie was too bloated. There was too much going on, and I'm not gonna lie. Like there were times when I was watching this movie where I was a bit confused. I knew what the overall plot was and what the main quest was. I understood that they were on a fetch quest to get something that they needed to fix Rocket. Okay, fair enough. But there were times where I was confused as to why are they here? What are they doing here again? I'm not quite sure. And I wasn't 100% sure about why the gold guy was trying to kill them and what his whole role was. There were parts of it
uh,
that did confuse me on first viewing. And if you didn't watch a lot of Marvel stuff and you didn't really know this stuff, if you just hadn't seen any of these Marvel movies and you walked in and watched it, you would have had no idea what the hell was going on.
It definitely feels like that's one of the biggest problems with these newer Marvel movies. With like with the first stage ones, you could pretty much watch any one of those movies and you wouldn't feel that lost. But the problem with this phase is that we're in phase 5 now, so you pretty much need to have like an encyclopedic knowledge of all, at least like half the previous movies, to understand what's going on. It's pretty much impossible just to come in fresh with just this one movie and understand it. I mean, obviously that's goes without saying, it's a third movie in a trilogy, but still, it's definitely a hard franchise to get into if you weren't there from the beginning.
It is, yeah. But I think that's always the case with trilogies. To be fair, if you were to just start watching Return of the Jedi without having seen any Star Wars before, you'd be confused and not know what the hell was going on. So we do have to give it that caveat. Another thing that I did want to mention was that Nebula looked really bad in this movie. Nebula looked like Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins. That's who she immediately reminded me of. Baldy. She's got this kind of not flabby, but it's not exactly a gym body. And she was really, hot in Guardians 1 and this time around. I don't know if it's the clothes that they had the actress wearing, or maybe the actress put on a bit of weight or something, so she looked a bit she lost her shape a little and she looked a little more masculine. I don't know, but the character didn't look good. Like Nebula did not look good in this movie. And you might think that that's a bit shallow of me to say, but look, at the end of the day, this is film. It's an audio visual art, and you do want the characters to look good. And I would criticize men just as easily if they let themselves go where they look bad in a movie or were made to look bad. For example, Sean Connery as Bond. If you ever watch You Only Live Twice or Diamonds Are Forever, he's overweight in those movies. He doesn't look good. That's not him at his best. That's not his best Bond. And that's why he's not my favorite Bond. My favorite Bond is probably Pierce Brosnan, because he always showed up. He always gave it his best. Whereas I think probably the greatest Bond performance, maybe it is Sean Connery and Goldfinger, but there were times where he was phoning it in, and there were times where he showed up overweight. So this isn't just me being, a sexist, misogynist pig that wants wank bait on screen. That's not what's going on here. I'm just saying that Nebula looked far worse in this movie. You know what I mean?
I think I get what you mean. I didn't pay much attention to that part. It wasn't really high on my list of things. I paid a little more attention to just like whether or not her character was at least engaging, which she was. Though I think part of it was boiled down to like the clothes she was wearing, because those were more normal looking clothes compared to the like spacesuits she usually wears.
Yeah.
So, again, I wasn't paying much attention to that particular detail.
Yeah. All right, let's check in with the chat for a wee bit. So, Le Monde 2007. Are you French, Le Monde? They lure you in with your favorite characters, then replace them with all the girl bosses after you're invested. That was certainly the case. Yeah, that's true. I mean, that happened with the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. They lured everybody in with the promise of Obi-Wan, and then we got Reva running around screaming at everything, like literally screaming at her in the show. They're going to do it with Indiana Jones. If anybody shows up for that movie, you'll go for Indiana Jones, and instead you will get Phoebe Waller-Bridge. So she'll be the guard boss in that. They did it with the Star Wars. We all went there for Han, Luke, and Leia, and instead we got this absolute digestive biscuit of a plain piece of white bread, boring everyone's tits off.
It's
running
just
around, being a Mary Sue, doing everything perfectly. And to just give one example, when she had to get the Wayfinder from the fallen Death Star in the ocean, she goes over there on a kind of sailboat. And I remember watching this thinking, why the hell? Where did she learn to use the sailboat, and how is she able to do this the first time round? Why is she like, this is just one example of the many, many things that she's able to do perfectly first time round.
it's
And that's
definitely
just one example. That's what Le Monde's talking about. You come for these characters, and instead you get these really boring, unrelatable girl bosses.
it
By the
really is.
way, Fan Without a Face, just letting you know, Penty Linkola 23 says, Fan Without a Face, please, your microphone is brushing up against something and it's distracting.
Oh, does it sound like it's brushing up against something right
Yes.
now?
Not now, but there have been times where it sounds like there's like a water bottle being brushed against it or something.
Oh, sorry about that. Hang on.
But thanks for letting us know, Penty.
Okay,
Anyway, yeah.
how's it sound now?
I mean, it sounds fine. It's just whatever was brushing against it.
Yeah, that one thing was when I accidentally, knocked one of the pop filter off of it, so I put it back on. So that was part of the reason.
All right, okay. Yeah, well, Hidden Hand Media says I tried to leave Endgame when they made the time machine and Fat Thor, but my girlfriend wouldn't let me. I was done. Yeah, I was never a huge MCU fan, to be fair. Although I did enjoy the movies; they were really fun movies to watch in the cinema. And after Endgame, I was pretty much I needed a reason to get reinvested, and they never gave it to me. Probably the best thing I've seen from them is Guardians 3. A lot of people would say that Spider-Man No Way Home is a great movie. I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie, and I think that the ending is pretty bad. It doesn't make any sense. I talked about it in my video on believability about
Yeah.
Ant-Man 3, and so I still think it's a good movie though. It's a lot of fun, and it's not filled with woke shite. And that's the other thing I really like about Guardians 3. Like there's none of the woke crap in it. You compare it to Ant-Man 3 and it's night and day.
It definitely, I was definitely surprised that it didn't include any stuff like that. I suppose part of it is because it focused mostly on the whole animal abuse aspect, which isn't a woke thing. It's just a human thing. We don't
Yeah.
like seeing animals get abused. And I feel like they also are. Maybe they realize. Maybe it's also because it's James Gunn. Because I mean, we've seen he made the Suicide Squad a few years ago, back when that's when the whole woke thing was more of a more prominent, and that was pretty much not that woke to begin with. So
Yeah.
I think at least he realizes that it is a
Yeah.
death knell to include that stuff.
And he's the kind of director who will actually have creative independence on his movies because he's a big name, and they're not going to be able to interfere as much. I mean, if anyone ever wonders why do they get amateur writers and amateur directors, people who don't have much experience to direct big movies, one of the reasons they do it, first of all, it's cheaper, but secondly, they can basically command them to do what they want. So if you are Marvel Studios, you don't necessarily want to hire a really experienced director because that director is going to want to do his or her own thing. You want to hire someone who's less experienced and who you can basically bully and get them to do what you want. So, but there is a price to that as well. You're going to end up with more amateur stuff. But I think with James Gunn, they would have to give him creative freedom, or else he would not. He probably wouldn't do the movie because he doesn't need to. He's over at Warner Brothers trying to remake DCU. He doesn't need the work. So the only circumstance in which he's going to go and work for Marvel and make a movie for them is if they let him do his own thing, which obviously they did, and it worked out well. It was a good decision to just let him do that.
Yeah, and they
But
already tried to boot him once, and that ended up resulting in a lot of Marvel fans freaking out. So
yeah,
they can't just boot him, at least not until the Guardians franchise is over, which I guess it is now. So I don't think we'll be seeing anything more from him. But at this point, I give the MCU, I want to say 3, maybe 4 more years before it dies. This latest writer's strike is not doing them any favors, and they've pretty much ruined every major character that from the original Avengers. I basically just said, "That's it, screw this, I'm out." When I saw what they did to the Hulk in She-Hulk, because I've been a Hulk fan for so long, and when I saw how they neutered him so badly, it was like, why? Just why?
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I've got a little list here of the upcoming MCU stuff, and you can tell me if you think any of this is going to do anything for them. So we've seen Guardians 3. They have Secret Invasion coming out, then Loki, the big one that everyone is really excited for, the Marvels coming out on November 10th. And it says X-Men 97 fall 2023. I don't know what that is. And
That's essentially going to be them. Are you familiar with the old X-Men cartoon from the 90s?
no, no.
Well, it was a really popular interpretation of the X-Men that came around in the 1990s. It was like the Marvel version of Batman the Animated Series, of a little goofier. And apparently, from what I understand, Marvel is trying to bring back that same show with some of the same writers and animators and everything else. But of course, they've also said they're going to make it a bit more reflective of modern times. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, they're gonna basically take a popular cartoon from the '90s and piss all over it.
Well, I you'd be more of a Marvel expert than me. I think if you, I mean, you say you give them 3 years before the movies just become so unprofitable that they're going to have to, that they basically die. Um, I mean, do you, if you look at, say, where Lucasfilm is now, Lucasfilm is, as far as I'm concerned, it's just an albatross around Disney's neck at this stage. It's dead. Like it's a completely dead movie studio that makes dead franchises, and they're gone. Like they're completely gone. Marvel isn't there yet. Like Marvel can still, it can still pull in. Now, fair enough, Ant-Man 3 was a flop, but Wakanda Forever made a little bit of money, not much, to be fair, and it was a disappointment. And it looks like Guardians is also going to make some money. I don't think a Star Wars movie, for example, could do that right now. So, will Marvel end up a dead franchise as Star Wars absolutely is in 2 or 3 years? With the direction they're going in, and with all of the heroes being female now, and with, as you say, James Gunn pretty much being gone now, and with the Guardians out, probably, yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. I don't think they're going to change course. I think they're going to press ahead with all of these female versions of the characters that we loved. Just and that's their attitude. Their attitude is, well, it's all about the powers. We just swap the powers over to these new females, and the audience will come with them. They won't, and I think you're right. They'll lose their audience steadily over the next 3 years. It'll be interesting to see how it'll go, but I really cannot imagine that they will ever get back to the heights of Phase 3. That's just not going to happen.
I think it's also just because franchise has been going on for so long, and something some people have pointed out in some videos is that there's always like a movie genre that lasts for about a decade before it just runs its course. The cowboy movie, the action hero movie, the slasher genre, they all lasted for about a decade, and then they started to run dry after that, and pretty much faded out after like a few more years. And that's pretty much where Marvel is at this point. They've already gone past their golden age, and now they're just in the rotting stage where they slowly but steadily get worse and worse until people are just sick and tired of them. And I just don't see how Marvel can keep dragging this out, since they've, like you said, removed pretty much every likable character that we had. And there's not a lot of reason for people to watch. And not to mention their merch doesn't sell that well, and their animated shows are practically non-existent. They pretty much don't have anything left except for the movies. Even their video games are bad. I just don't
Yeah.
I just don't see how they can hold on to this much longer.
Yeah, the movie cycle you were describing is actually really interesting. If I remember correctly, it's every movie genre goes through a cycle. It starts off with the pioneer or the experimental stage, and then you move on to the golden era. Once it becomes a bit more mainstream and a bit more money goes into it, you get your golden era, and then you get deconstruction, in which they're deconstructing the tropes and they're kind of being a bit more experimental, and it becomes aware of itself and all of these tropes that it's built up. And then the last stage, I think, is parody, and that's it. And I think it's 4 or 5. I might be missing one, but it's these stages that genres go through, and it generally does go in that order. And it's thought that basically the superhero movies are now in their parody stage; they're dying. You look at what's happened so far this year. There've been 2 big superhero releases, and they both flopped: Ant-Man 3 and Shazam 2. And bear in mind that the Guardians isn't a superhero movie; it's a sci-fi action movie. It's not really a superhero movie. But that's I suppose that's kind of a technicality, but it is, I think, important to bear that in mind. And also, these are very popular characters, and Chris Pratt is very popular. He's a box office draw. So, but yeah, well, it will be interesting to see, and especially with Nintendo coming onto the scene now with Mario Bros, which was a massive hit, we might see a big flurry of video game movies coming in, and that they will. The thing is, you can't base superhero movies can't exist in the box office unless they're top dog, because they're so expensive to make. You can't have an $80 million, you can't even have $100 million superhero movie. They have to be like minimum $150 million. You look at the budget for Guardians; it was $250 million.
Which
I
is
think Ant-Man 3 was close to 200 million. These are massively expensive movies, so they need to be top dog, regularly bringing in $1 billion revenue at the box office, or they just can't be released in cinema. They have to do streaming. So it's either everything or pretty much streaming when it comes to superhero content. So if there is a big renaissance in the video game movies, which have traditionally been shit, stuff like, for example, like Doom, seeing Doom with The Rock, like it's a good movie, but it's kind of bad good. It's good because it's just so funny how bad it is. It's an amusing film. Although I think it's genuinely fun to watch, but it's garbage, you know. Or the Resident Evil
It's
movies, again, fun, good to watch, but kind of trashy.
it always bugs me that I'm a Doom fan. I've played several of the games, and I'd always find it kind of funny that it's so hard for them to make a good Doom movie. Honestly, I feel like one thing they should just do is just do like what Mario did, and just make a Doom animated movie. Then you can do all the violence and gore and crazy stuff you want, and you don't have to worry about stunts, costumes, and all that jazz. Since they already tried that twice with Doom Annihilation being an especially offensive movie, because there they literally replaced Doom Guy with Doom Girl, or oh no, I'm sorry, Joanne Dark, who literally said on Twitter, "We don't need no Doom Guy in Doom."
It's bad.
Wow.
Bad.
But yeah, it would be hilarious if video game movies end up becoming the next genre of film that end up becoming really popular, considering, like you said, outside of maybe the first Mortal Kombat movie and maybe one or two others that are just funny to watch because of how bad they are. They've always been really bad, but
They've
I
always
don't
been
know.
terrible. Like you go back and you look at the Mario Bros movie in the 90s, like it's almost I have to watch that movie again. Excuse me. I have to watch that movie again. But yeah, if the video game movies become really big, that's where the money's going to go. And if the money does go there, I I don't think that you the video game the superhero movies won't be able to compete. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. It's not necessarily that targeting the same demographic, because bear in mind the Nintendo Super Mario Bros. Movie was very much aimed at children, and like pre-adolescent children seemed to be the target audience. That, and obviously it was nostalgia bait. So Marvel definitely has a much more mature audience than what these Nintendo Illumination movies seem to be targeting. So really, I think the people who should be worried should be Disney Studios, the Disney animated classics like Strange World, you know, all that vomit. I'd love to see Disney Studios just go into the red and have just disaster after disaster. That would be wonderful. I mean, it has happened to an extent. Last year they had a bunch of bombs. Oh god, it would be so good if the Little Mermaid flopped. I would absolutely love to see that happen.
I would.
But
Personally, one thing I'd love is to see them do so badly they actually have to pay people to go to Disney World just to get people to go in there, because you want to talk about price gouging. I saw a video not too long ago from a TikTok. It showed this family, they spent like $3,000 after just like a few days at Disney World. Like they spent like $900 in just one day at Disney for just like food and stuff, and I'm like, how in God's name do they expect people to afford this, especially now? You know, it would be real. You know, they'd be in the red if they have to actually, like offer half off or 75% off stuff at Disney World.
yeah, we're gonna move on now to our next topic, which is the Woman King. Did you watch the Woman King?
I did, and I hate you for making me watch it.
I'm sorry, man. Like, I apologized in the email. I said, and I thanked you for suffering through all this shit. And I mean it, like, really thank you, because you've given up your time to suffer through this this utter garbage. So thanks for that.
Hey, it's
But
no big
it's
deal. I'm just happy to
Nick
be. I'm happy to be a part of this.
Nicholas Phelps is in the chat, and he said, watching Black Widow take down 20 guys while her male partner was fighting one was still retarded. Yeah, exactly. And that segues very nicely into the Woman King, because the Woman King is full of that nonsense. Now, I'm not gonna. I don't want to bias your opinion, because maybe you thought it was a masterpiece.
I did not.
I have a lot of stuff I want to say about the Woman King, because this was a movie which obviously it came out last year, and there was a big controversy about it, about the fact that it was a complete historical distortion, and these horrible, rotten slavers who had committed genocide. This Dahomey tribe would sacrifice 500 people, 500 slaves every year were sacrificed in a religious ceremony to honor the dead Dahomey kings. These people were as evil as any civilization that has ever existed. That is not an exaggeration, okay? And they were being glorified by these fucking Karens who had been employed by Sony to make this garbage historical distortionist fantasy. So Now, I did a video on this. I think that they were basically greenlit because of the George Floyd riots. The United States went through a period of national insanity. Basically, everybody wanted the virtue signal. Everybody wanted to show off their anti-racist credentials. And so what happened was that basically Sony decided to greenlight this movie, which had been floating around Hollywood for like 5 years. Nobody wanted to touch it because they knew it would flop. But Sony, in the, just drunk on virtue signaling, decided, yeah, we're gonna greenlight this movie, The Woman King, and it's gonna come out and it's gonna be awesome. And they later sobered up a bit and gave it the absolute bare minimum budget because they couldn't scrap it. They would be called racist if they scrapped this Black Power movie. So I think that's how it came into being. It basically fluked its way into being as a result of all of that madness that went on in 2020. The movie, but I think what was missing last year during the whole controversy was an actual review of the movie itself. Like, what's the movie like? Is it any good? No one was talking about that. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to watch it because I've been meaning to watch it for ages. I'll just sit down, I'll watch it. I'll be fair with it. I was very open minded. I wasn't just necessarily going to hate it. I hated the historical distortion, but I was ready for it to be a good movie on its own, all historical inaccuracies aside, and not even inaccuracies, all historical lies and distortion aside. And I watched it and I have my thoughts on it, but first I want to hear yours. So what did you think?
If I were to describe The Woman King in one word, it'd be boring. This movie has no reason to be over 2 hours long, and it's predictable. Like you said, it's basically meant almost like a propaganda movie. They basically make these the Agoji, that's what they're technically called, basically seem like this unbelievably ultimate fighting unit of warriors who basically never lose a fight. It kind of reminded me of a something I saw in another reviewer called Cynical Reviewer. He did a review of Braveheart, and one of his criticisms was that in every battle, the Scots were basically always depicted as just whooping the English's butt, no matter how badly outnumbered they were, and you never see them lose. And that's pretty much how it is in this. Literally, you never see the Agoji suffer any real losses, despite the fact that logically they should. They're always winning, and it's that just gets boring after a while. You pretty much know from the start how things are going to go. They're going to fight. They're going to win. They're going to give some heavy-handed speech about how slavery is bad, even though that's literally what the Dahomey were based around. Because the movie's trying to make them look like good guys. Because why wouldn't they? It's just predictable, and the historical revisionism is also prominent there. I remember, I think it was Viola Davis's character outright said that the West had brought its evil to Africa, like referring to slavery. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you serious right now? You guys do remember? We're not stupid. We have Google. We can look up that that's not true. I mean, how full of themselves do they have to be? It's like they go out of their way to make these monstrous people who I researched myself, and the stuff that they did was horrible. The Agoji especially, they were violent. They attacked and kidnapped and raided people and sold them into slavery, and they're trying so hard to make them good. And I'm like just wondering why? Why these guys out of the thousands, millions of tribes of African people that actually existed, or even the legends that exist in Africa? These are the people you chose? Why? Just oh wait, I know why. It's because they're kind of like the Dora Milaje from Black Panther, only they're real. And that's pretty much it. They saw black warrior women in Africa and they thought, oh, that's good. Who cares about the rest?
Yeah, and the reality is they weren't warriors, they were slavers. Like they were trained to fight and they could use weapons, but their job wasn't to get involved in battles. What would happen is that the Dahomey, the tribe, were called the Dahomey, they would go to war with someone in a slaving war, their goal obviously being to enslave the entire population of those people. And while all of the men from the tribe they were going to war with went out to defend themselves against the Dahomey, the Agoji women were then sent into the villages of the people they were attacking. They were sent into these villages, which now had no men defending them. There would have just been a few old men with sticks, women and kids, because all of the fighting men were off fighting the Dahomey warriors, the Dahomey men. So the Agoji would go into these now undefended villages, and that's when they'd kill the last few old men with sticks. Anyone who was too old to fetch a decent price at the slave market would have been summarily murdered, and then they ran off with the kids and women, and little boys, and they would have sold them off into slavery. And that's how they operated. They didn't get involved in battles. The only major battle they were ever involved in was against the French, and they were annihilated in minutes by a single French bayonet charge.
Which
Right now,
I always find that part kind of hilarious. Like they make these women look like they're like the African versions of the Spartans, but in reality, they got their butts handed to them in like 5 minutes, and they only killed like what 5 guys after they lost like 500 of themselves. And
yeah.
it really does make it seem like for the most part, they were more a ceremonial kind of army. They were there to look intimidating, but they actually weren't. And their main job was just to be assassins and thieves, and
Well, they were slavers. They were raiders. They would raid villages with no fighting men because the fighting men were off fighting the Dahomey men, and they would go and pillage and raid and enslave the villagers uh, behind the front. But let's have a look here. Basically, I thought the reason they chose to do this movie about these slavers, the Dahomey and the Agoji, the Agoji women in particular, it's because this is and this is what you really get watching the movie. It's a feminist power fantasy. Fundamentally, this movie isn't. It does have elements, obviously, of anti-Westernism and of Afrocentrism and anti-white racism. That's all there. But fundamentally, this is a feminist power fantasy. The women who are depicted in this movie are everything that a modern feminist thinks women should be. They are women that have no children, they have no husbands, they get to run around behaving like uber masculine men, they kill men who get in their way, they liberate other women. In the first scene in the movie, they go and kill a bunch of guys and then they liberate these terrified women. They don't really have to work, right? They just spend their days training, performing rituals, doing these stupid, boring dances, engaging in sisterly love. They all love each other, right? There's no hatred, there's no anger, there's no jealousy. Just in this Agoji female warrior band, everybody loves everybody. And they live in their own compound that is theirs specifically, and it's separate from the men. And this is where they live, and this is where they train. They fit perfectly the 21st century feminist ideal of what a woman should be: cruel, powerful, childless, respected, feared, masculine, physically strong, independent, and having no need whatsoever of a man. That is why they chose these slaver women for this movie, because it fits the 21st century feminist power fantasy.
And the thing about it is the fact that it's so anti-Western is like the most ironic part of this, because the Westerners, Europe and France particularly, they were the reason that slavery was basically ended in Africa. It's been, you just look it up. They literally were against slavery in Africa. They fought against people like the Dahomey to stop it. They blockaded it to stop the shipment of slaves, and they were the reason that the Dahomey eventually were forced to switch from selling slaves to palm oil. It wasn't just because it wasn't moral reasons like they show where Viola Davis is showing we can Africa should not have to sell its own people into slavery. It's like it was literally because the people that this movie is trying to vilify that it was ended. And I just find that so ironic. It's like they can't accept that Africa did perform engaged in slavery, and that it ended ironically through what because of the influence of Westerners. It's just ridiculous that they can't just accept that fact.
Yeah, but we'll move on from the politics because this was all discussed last year. I'm glad we discussed it, but I do want to get to the actual problems with the movie itself outside of the political realm. The first one, in my opinion, is that the characters are dull as dishwater. The characters are just template characters. So, for example, the Dahomey King, he's not a character. He is just the wise, benevolent king. That's it. That is his role. He's wise and he's strong, and he's a strong king, and he's a wise king, and he's strong, and that's just it. Like, there's no depth to his character whatsoever. It's just a template. Viola Davis plays the wise, fierce warrioress. She's fierce, and she's wise, and she's strong, and that's it.
And she has a tragic
depth to her character. They try to give her a little bit of depth, a little bit of backstory, but they don't do anything with it. She just remains this. She starts out a wise, fierce warrioress. She finishes a wise, fierce warrioress. There's no character development whatsoever. So why would you even include a backstory if she's not even going through an arc? It's not even a hero's journey arc. She starts out this perfect feminist vision of what a warrior should be, and she finishes that way. So why did you bother with the backstory? It's pointless. You had the ambitious but feisty trainee. Again, another template character. That was the little black. Well, obviously they're all black. That was the little girl, the little tiny one, who is the main character basically, and who, of course, wipes out men left and right once she gets hold of a weapon. She's ambitious but feisty trainee. That's her little role, her little template role. Then you have the harsh but fair drill instructor. Again, total cliche. Think back to Starship Troopers. Zim, he's the drill instructor in Starship Troopers. He's actually good. He's enjoyable and fun to watch and funny and really well played. This one is super boilerplate, super just dull as hell. You've seen it a million times. Just the harsh but fair drill instructor. Again, template character. You've also got the money grubbing middleman slaver, the white Portuguese guy. There's one white character in this movie, and he's the money grubbing slaver. Again, he's just an evil template villain. There's no depth to these characters whatsoever. There's the morally ambiguous character who is half black, half white. He's the result of a European man and a Dahomey woman, I think, something like that. And he's literally caught between these two worlds, and his job is to be the morally ambiguous character. Again, it's a template character. You have the big bad, that huge black guy who gets his ass kicked by 60-year-old Viola Davis. He's just a big bad. He's a big bad guy because he's big and he's bad and he has a big sword. Template villain, no depth whatsoever. And you also have the jealous wife. And this was probably the only thing that I really liked about the movie. That girl was smoking hot, but she was just a jealous wife character. They're all templates. All of these characters, every single one of them, are very shallow, dull template characters with no layers to them, absolutely no depth. They don't feel like real characters. They just feel kind of caricaturish and two-dimensional.
That's part of the reason why I said the movie was boring, because when you remove the controversy, the politics, and all that jazz aside, it's just so predictable. Like the second I saw this one, the feisty girl you mentioned, I was like, oh, I see where this is going. She's going to be the feisty feminist, somewhat what's the word? Shoot. The one who goes against the grain, the one who resists, who starts out weak and frail and then gets strong and confident and all that jazz that we've seen in like 50 or 60 different other movies and all that jazz. You pretty much know how everything's going to go, like once you've seen the first few minutes of the movie. Like, again,
yeah. And you recognize those character templates immediately, and you know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's predictable. And I think that at the end of the day, that's probably the worst part, is that after all the controversy stuff just like hypes you up to really hate this movie, and you watch it yourself, you think that while the revisionist stuff is bad, at the end of the day, the movie is just boring. I mean, say what you want about Braveheart or The Patriot. At the very least, those movies are entertaining to watch and fun to watch, and the characters are at least memorable. But this movie is just bland. It's a by the numbers movie that you've seen a million times and really doesn't have any reason to be over 2 hours long.
It is extremely boring. And the other thing is, sorry, I'm just putting my earbuds in here. The other thing is, it sells itself as a kind of war movie, an action movie, but there's very little action in it. You have a battle at the start, which is quite short, and you have what is supposed to be the main big set piece battle of the movie, where the Agoji take on I forget what they were called, the Oyi or Oyi or something.
Oyo.
The Oyo, their enemy tribe. So the Dahomey fight their enemy tribe, and this is supposed to be the big climactic face-off battle of the movie. And it feels very small scale. It's quite a dull battle. It's pretty badly directed, pretty badly shot. And then there's some fighting at the end, which again feels very small scale. So for all of the notion that this is a war movie and that it sells itself as that, it's mostly just these women hanging around their compound, training, talking shit, sisterly love. There's like 3 or 4 dances in this, these long, boring, repetitive dances, in which obviously the director is so enamored with this African culture of these dances, and she really wanted to depict this on screen, but it's so boring. You're right, most of this movie is just really dull. It's boring stuff, and there's tons of things wrong with this. I mentioned these Agoji ceremonies that were mind numbing. These long traditional African ceremonies that these women engage in to show how tribal they are. And yeah, it's boring as hell. The battles are poorly shot, and there's a lot of edit cheats. So because of the low budget, they they cheated a lot in terms of how they were cutting, and like somebody would swipe a sword at an enemy, but the camera would move behind him, so you didn't see the kill swipe because that's much cheaper, right? There was a lot of that, and the battles didn't look good. So when you had a battle, there was no sense of scale. The battles felt really small, and the battle lines disintegrated really quickly. And then it was just shots of the women warriors fighting. Now, for me, the biggest problem with this movie, even if you kind of enjoyed the story, I think this just dragged you out of the movie. It just completely shattered immersion and believability. It was the Slay Queen choreography. That was absolutely absurd. So you have these little women, and a lot of them are really small, and they're fighting these battles with these big buff dudes, and they're not only holding their own, but they're dominating these men. It's fucking ridiculous. Like watching a near 60-year-old Viola Davis in a sword fight with a dude who's like 6'3" and weighs 270 pounds. It's absurd. Like she fights him for 3 minutes or something. They have this big showdown, and she eventually kills him. But what would actually happen is a guy that size against some grandma like Viola Davis, he would just swipe his sword at her, and whatever kind of guard she could block his sword, she could guard it, she could do whatever the hell she wanted. It wouldn't matter. His swipe, his thrust would go right through her guard and cut her down. He
Or
would kill
like
her with one shot.
or
Simple as
like
that.
or like the fight during an earlier fight between them where he is literally slamming her on the hard stone ground. I've fallen down on mats the wrong way, and that can leave me stunned for a few seconds. So getting slammed by a guy who's built like a football player, slamming a 60-year-old woman on hard rock. She should not
It's
be getting up
ridiculous.
after that. She should not be able to get right back up after that. She should be on the ground groaning in pain, possibly with bruised something or other.
This is most of the fight choreography. It's these women, and some of it's so dumb. There's scenes where you've got them doing these kind of judo throws where they'll take this dude twice her size and she throws him over her shoulder, and the women do this regularly, or they do arm bars, and basically it's very obliging stuntmen jumping over them into the dirt, and it looks like what it is. It looks like a stuntman doing his best to look like he's getting his ass kicked by a little girl who couldn't throw a guy that size. Like, that's absurd. I couldn't throw a guy that size.
Yeah, and
Right?
with the whole judo thing, usually there's a lot of footwork involved. You got to trip them. You got to trip the guy up and use the momentum and everything. But most of the time, it doesn't even look like they're doing that
No,
much in this.
they're just grabbing them and throwing them. And like I did boxing for 3 years, and I know for a fact that if I fought men that size, I wouldn't beat them. They're too big, right?
Yeah,
Even though I have some martial arts skill, it doesn't matter. They'd go through me.
yeah,
They would just ragdoll me,
yeah.
right?
I
And
would.
I'm a small man, so they would. That's all. But and you've got women that are smaller than me who are literally just throwing them over their shoulders, out fencing them. It's just it's so immersion shattering. It looks utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, I did wrestling when I was in high school, and it was very and just pinnings and just lifting someone up and pinning them is a lot more difficult than they make it look like in most movies. Even if the weight difference between you and your opponent isn't that big, they're obviously giving it everything they've got to avoid getting slammed on the ground and everything. And the more weight you add to it, the harder it is. So when there's like 100-pound difference between these two people and a muscle difference especially, they shouldn't even be able to make these guys move like a centimeter. And some of the
Yeah,
stuff they do in the movie is also ridiculous. Like there's that one lady who, like, during the opening scene is stabbing the guy with like her pointed nails.
so dumb.
I mean, I don't know if I mean, is there even like a historical context for that, or did they just
No,
do
you
that
break
because they
your
thought it
fingers.
looked cool?
They did it because they thought it looked cool. The reality is you just break your fingers doing that. There was another one, and this was probably my favorite. I thought this was really funny. One of the Agoji women is this wee chubby number. She's a wee Teletubby, and she there's scenes where she's in the battle, and there's not a shred of muscle on this girl. She's a wee chubster, and there's a scene where they attack the slave port, and she's running down an alley like chopping these big white soldiers down left and right, like wah wah wah, and it's just hilarious watching this wee Jigglypuff, you know, killing all these men,
Yeah,
and it's such bollocks. It's such bullshit watching it. I actually laughed out loud at the wee fat one, wiping out these professional soldiers.
and and it always feels like the guy, like you always can tell, like the soldiers, the male soldiers are like holding back in one way or another. Like the one scene where they escape from that one port town, they're all shooting guns at them, and they're on the boats and everything. You're wondering to yourself, you guys have cannons. Shoot them in their canoes with your cannons. You have guns. Shoot
Yeah,
them.
the Europeans are very obliging the whole time. There was one like they do their best with the costumes and by putting like bracelets around their biceps to make their biceps bulge a bit and make them look stronger. They really do their best to try to make these girls look strong. But there's sometimes they just can't hide it. There was one scene where Viola Davis is swimming in the sea and she's trying to swim to a boat. And when she gets out of the water, she just looks like an exhausted grandma. And 5 minutes before she was fighting this heavyweight boxer and holding her own, and it's just ridiculous. It's stupid and it breaks immersion. The choreography is completely girl boss slay queen choreography. It's ridiculous, it's dumb, and it makes the movie unwatchable for me.
You mean like those one instances where they like pole vault over like one of their comrades to do that whole midair thing?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's
Yeah,
like a circus act.
yeah. I mean, like even in kung fu movies with wuxia movies, they don't do anything that ridiculous, and those movies are intentionally supposed to be that silly.
Yeah, that was pretty bad stuff. The other thing is that it has really bad scene logistics. For example, there's one scene where Viola Davis is fighting the big bad, and the big bad calls for reinforcements, right? And all of the reinforcements run down a stone tunnel all at the exact same time. There's a big crowd of them. They just all happen to hear his call at the exact same time and run at the exact same time. And then the little girl, the main character, cuts a rope, and this causes a medieval gate to fall down and block them from getting into the courtyard where Viola Davis is fighting the big bad. Now, first of all, there were no gates like that in Africa. At that time, those gates just didn't exist. They were used to hold castles, medieval castles against attackers. By that time, they had been obsolete for 300 years. But they make an appearance in this scene because it's convenient to the scene. It's a way for this little woman to prevent all these warriors from coming in and killing Viola Davis. The other thing is, as well, how is it that they all come in, they all rush down the tunnel at exactly the same time? And that's not even the worst aspect of the poor scene logistics. Another one, and this was the worst one, prior to the main battle, Viola Davis and the other warrior women, the Amazons, they build piles of gunpowder bombs disguised as anthills, but in order to blow up the enemy's camp. Now they do this before the enemy make camp, but it just so happens that their enemy tribe make camp at exactly the location where they set up all these anthill bombs. So when they set the anthill bombs on fire with a long line of gunpowder that they have trailing from the enemy camp out to their hidden location, they're able to blow up the enemy camp, which, as I say, very conveniently went down in the booby-trapped area. There was miles and miles and miles of open plain that they could have camped in, but no, they decided that they were going to camp in exactly the spot that was booby-trapped. It's so dumb.
One part I thought was really dumb was the scene like during that part with the gate. Like right before that, when Viola Davis and all those other Dahomey women basically are saying to the main bad guy that we are not here to be your slaves. We are here to tell you that we will not bow to you. And then they basically do what I guess is their version of the middle finger, going to him, and I'm like, okay, now in a normal situation, this would be the part where the bad guy orders all of his men to point their guns at you and shoot you because they're basically giving you the middle finger, and that's kind of what you would do in this situation. But somehow there's like no guards there at all. This is a fortress full of slavers and everything, and there's no guards around to do something against these armed warrior women. I mean, I know he's cocky and everything, but still, no one shoots a gun. You don't even have like a pistol or something on you.
Yeah, the whole battle logistics, the scenes, the entire movie is just crap, and the direction is overall very poor, very bland. The acting is bland. It ranges from bland to quite bad. Viola Davis, people were talking about, oh, she should get awards for this. She was fine. She was okay. There's nothing special. And the director, I remember when the Oscars were coming out, the director played the race card and said, we didn't get a nomination because racism. But honestly, like, love, it's because your movie's shit. Like, all politics aside, distortion aside, it's just a bad movie.
Yeah,
It's
and
a
I mean it.
plain old crap movie, badly directed, bad action. The fight scenes look terrible. The acting isn't very good. The production design is crap and anachronistic. The costumes are just okay. There's nothing outstanding about this movie. Not a single thing stands out as good in this utterly mediocre piece of crap. That's
And
why it didn't get any awards, because it's garbage.
And I just don't get why, again, why this specific they wanted to make this specific movie. There are so many interesting stories in Africa. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I read a book that depicted the story of Anansi the spider, and I thought that could have made for a fun movie, a fun animated movie or something for them to make, or all the other African legends or anything like that. But they literally chose the worst people in the world to make the movie about regarding Africa, and they made the movie boring. You guys basically made a movie that was undefendable and boring, and this is
I
the hill
know.
you guys wanted to die on. And you might as well it might as well have been one of those ant hills full of gunpowder, because that's how badly it went for them.
Yeah, well, they got what they deserved. The movie flopped quite badly, so it was a just outcome. So we're going to move on now to um, the live action Peter Pan and Wendy Abomination,
Oh God.
which I call LAR17, which means basically Disney live action remake number 17, because this is the 17th live action remake from Disney. Little Mermaid will be LAR18, live action remake 18. So I'm looking forward to that. I did a review on it, so let's just hear your thoughts. What did you think of LAR17?
I think that this movie had no reason to freaking exist, for one thing, because I mean, we have had so many Peter Pan movies in just like the last few decades. I mean, you've got Hook with Robin Williams. You had that other one. I think it was just called Peter Pan. I think it was just called Peter Pan, that came out a few years later. And then there was the Pan movie with with freaking Hugh Jackman as Blackbeard of all things, which honestly wasn't bad. It was at least kind of interesting. And then you've got this, and I'm just left wondering to myself, why? How many more times can we make movies about the same thing? And there's a lot of the stuff you pointed out, it's pretty much what you expect at this point. Wendy is depicted as this super competent, super ultra feminist, modern, tough as nails person who somehow can fight off grown men and pirates by herself, and is super confident and wants to. I don't want to be a mother or anything like that. I want to have a career. I want to live like this. And you're like, oh, good Lord, more of this stuff. And then there's the whole Lost Boys thing with, you're not old boys. And they go, so then why are you called the Lost Boys? It really feels like they just made this movie just because they felt like they could.
I think we might have lost the fan without a face. Maybe his
Again,
internet went
it's
down for a
boring.
bit.
They're all boring. I these days is that they're so dull. There's nothing interesting. It's like they think that just because they change one or two things, that's all that they need to do to make the movie good. It's not. It has to be written good.
Yeah, the politicization. I mean, this is as woke a movie as will ever. I mean, it doesn't have all of the LGBTQIA2 plus PXYZ stuff in there, but that's basically the only thing that's missing in terms of wokeness. It's as woke a movie as you're going to get from Disney, from anyone. Everything, you've got the race swaps. I'll tell you one thing that I did, because I actually ended up watching the whole thing. Prior to my review, I only watched like 25 minutes, and I just thought, fuck this, I am not wasting any more time on this. And because I didn't want to do a full review of the whole movie, if I did the whole movie, that video would have been much longer, and I would have been talking about this thing forever, because there's so much wrong with it. I thought, enough, okay, just enough. These fucking remakes need to stop. They just need to stop. But I did end up watching the whole movie so we could do this stream. And one thing that I've determined throughout the course of watching it was that it was deliberate what they did to Peter Pan, because it's unbelievable. Like, that actor, the wee guy that they got to play him, is terrible. Like, he's absolutely awful. He has no charisma, no personality, no screen presence, no ability, nothing, no diction. He's just terrible. He can't even speak his lines at a decent volume. That was obviously deliberate. I think Disney deliberately chose an actor they knew would be a damp squib on screen because they wanted to kill the image of Peter Pan. They wanted to kill off this image of Peter Pan as this boisterous, masculine uh, icon of adolescent energy, which he was, right? He was like, he was the boy who didn't grow up. He's a boy. He's a symbol of boyish energy. And because boys are now verboten in the modern woke West, the war on boys and so forth, they don't like masculinity. They don't like boyhood. They want to encourage boys to become little girls and little girls to become little boys. They want to completely destroy masculinity. So they decided that it was necessary to destroy Peter Pan, and they deliberately hired this wee actor who was terrible and had not got a shred of charisma. And that is why they hired him. They knew he was terrible, and they did it deliberately to kill the character of Peter Pan.
And it wasn't just the charisma; they also made him like the worst kind of person imaginable. Like when you take out the kidnapping thing, like which is prominent in all the movies, you've got his relationship with Hook in this movie. In the previous ones, Hook was just some pirate that he cut the hand off one day because he kept trying to kill him, which is a little intense but understandable. But in this movie, you got Hook being a former lost boy who wanted to see his mom. Peter basically booted him out of Neverland, and without even dropping him near where his mom might be, he gets adopted by pirates, grows up, comes back, says, "Peter, it's me, Hook, I'm back." And he's like, "Oh, you're old now. Oh, I'm going to cut your hand off and throw it to this crocodile now." And like, "You dick." And it's like,
Yeah, they turned him into the bad guy. So they made him a charisma vacuum. They made him a bore. Just the character, the character has no energy or presence on screen at all, and they made him the villain. All very deliberately. Also because they wanted to boost the Wendy character, right? And that's how they think. They think in order to boost the girls, you need to debase the boys. In order to have the girls shine that much more brightly, we need to insult and put down the boys and villainize them. And it was disgusting. And I'm glad that this movie got what it deserved. I think the Rotten Tomatoes scores. I tell you what, Rotten Tomatoes actually deleted the score. Rotten Tomatoes have become so corrupt. It was like 14% or 12% on Rotten Tomatoes, and Rotten Tomatoes have just removed it now because they're running cover for Disney. Rotten Tomatoes are total shills. They're a disgrace. They're an absolute disgrace, and it's not the first time they've done this.
Yeah, it's pretty much become like you can't trust most modern like video game or movie critics because 9 times out of 10 they're either biased or they are being bribed with like instant access or money or some other thing to basically blow smoke up this movie or this video game's butt regardless of how bad it is, and they don't care because as long as as long as the check doesn't bounce, they don't care, which is part of the reason why a lot more people consult online reviewers these days because they're a little bit more trustworthy than that compared to like the modern ones. It's basically gotten to the point where modern film criticism has just become so unreliable nowadays in a lot of, at least, the quote unquote professional critics. And I'm using air quotes here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Although you look at something like Peter Pan and Wendy, which is an abominable, utterly abominable plagiarist work. I refuse to even call it a movie. This piece of plagiarism is as bad a piece of media as you will encounter. Music, movies, video games, YouTube videos, doesn't matter. It's truly terrible. It's boring as hell. It's ugly. It's disgusting to look at. It's just awful. It's awful in every single respect. And somehow critics managed to give it 66% on Rotten Tomatoes. How? How?
Well,
Where does that 66% come from?
well,
Does it come from production design? No, it was god awful. It looked terrible. Is it the acting? The acting was terrible. Is it the plot of the story? The plot of the story was part plagiarized and part changed so that it could become modern political propaganda. Was it the great characters, the Mary Sue Tiger Lily, who was basically just a noble savage straw man of Native Americans? Was it Wendy, who was extremely unlikable? Was it Peter, who was a villain and boring as hell, just utterly pathetic? Where are you getting that 66% from? Please explain it to me because I didn't see it. I wouldn't even give this maybe 6%. I'd maybe give it 2% because Jude Law was at least trying.
I can tell you where that 66% came from. It came from an envelope full of cash and possibly a bag of cocaine.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. There's literally no other reason. If they even watched it, I mean, maybe they watched like 10 minutes and just thought, "Fuck this." Here, 66%. Yeah, good movie, fun, nice modern update for modern times. Right, I'm going away to get drunk. Like, I'm not even kidding. These people
Yeah,
won't even do their jobs. It's disgusting. And Rotten Tomatoes are a disgrace for taking the score down.
and the thing that's really annoying is that is that the movie Hook showed that it is possible to take this story and still make it interesting by approaching it from a different angle. Like, what would happen if Peter grew up and had kids? It
Well, I
was an
mean,
interesting.
that's the problem with these LAR movies, these live action remakes from Disney. You take all of this potential, all of this money, all of these resources, these not just the people that are working on them, but the money and everything, and you waste their time making this utter shite when you could be making original movies. You could be making many original movies for how much these pieces of shit cost. The Little Mermaid cost $200 million, and they probably spent another 200 million on marketing. I did a, I said this in my video. You could probably make 16 independent movies for that money. Like that's
Yeah,
just sick.
yeah, it's
That,
kind
that,
of
that
insane.
you're giving up, you're squandering all of these opportunities to just
I
plagiarize the past.
I just always find it so funny how much money it costs to make like one movie these days compared to the past. Like Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think that movie only cost like a little over. I think it was 20, maybe $30 million, and you get great acting, great stunts, great effects, great sets, and all that stuff. And this movie is like 10 times what that cost, and it looks bad. And can I just say, why in the world does everything on screen look like it was shot like a Pirates of the Caribbean movie? Like the colors are so faded and dry looking. It's so
They're very grim looking, yeah.
I don't get it. Why, how do you come up? How do you see Peter Pan, the whimsical tale of a place called Neverland where people can't grow up and all that stuff, and you immediately think of the inside, and you think of the same color as like a dive bar of some dive bar in the middle of
Yeah,
nowhere.
it's got this sickly yellowy green tinge to the whole movie. It's like a sick filter. It looks like a yellow green sick filter. If there was a scene in a movie where you were showing someone vomiting, you might use that filter, but it's over the entire movie. I-
Yeah,
It's it's disgusting to look at.
it's boring to look at. It's depressing to look at. It's cold. That's a good way to put it. Cold, because
Yeah, very.
yeah, like when you look at it, there's barely any light to it. It's kind of like imagining yourself walking through a barren, empty green field in the middle of winter where it's so cold that you pretty much feel depressed because the wind's blowing against you. It's cloudy everywhere, and you just feel so miserable because there's nothing to make you feel better. There's no scenery, there's no sunlight, there's no anything. You just feel cold and you just want to go anywhere but here.
Yeah. Um, but I don't want this to run too much over 2 hours, Family
Okay.
Letter Face. So I'm going to wrap things up. Thank you very much for coming in. And everybody, if you do want to take a look at the Family Letter Faces channel, there is a link in the description, so you can do that.
But yeah, this was a lot of fun, and I hope if your audience wants us to, we can do it again at some point. And I hope I didn't talk too much.
Yeah. No, you're great, man. Thanks very much for coming on, and especially thanks for suffering through all that shit that I asked you to watch. I really appreciate that.
Hey, it wasn't that big of a deal, but I got to admit, I just wasn't expecting those movies to be so boring. I thought they'd at least be
Yeah.
entertaining in a bad way.
Nah, they're just boring, especially the likes of the Woman King and Cleopatra. My God, just bores you to death. Anyway, thank you, Fan Without a Face, and thank you to everyone in the chat for sticking with us. And I hope you enjoyed the chat. And all the best. All right, enjoy your Sunday. Hey, bye bye.
And yep, you guys have a fun time, and hope to see you again.